geothermal policy group, or Team Geothermal Policy. So you can come up.
Wait a second because we lost the signal.
So many tuned in that they lost their reason thousands of people watching. Thousands.
I'm a super famous streamer. Told them all to pull up.
Yeah, you should find out how many people watch.
One person watched.
Let's just have a quick look.
Yeah, he streamed our presentation.
5. Waiting actually. Not actually started yet according to this.
What's the most
I had like 50 on the calls I did to the net zero working group. That was mainly online. It's the most nice run. What's the most number of people you've got presented to? Oh, actually no, it's for school, but then that's students, doesn't really count, but still. 100 kids there, I reckon.
Probably the cohorts.
Oh.
They're last. That's a room project, brother. Rosalind is winner. Damn, you were early.
You can't see it though, because you're too close.
I was a little bit early.
You're just kind of doing it.
I was planned early. Yeah, cesarean section was booked in.
Well, it was,
I was rudely awoken and I would have had to slept for a bit longer. He took the emergency out. You couldn't get through. Wait to get out.
But he came out not far up being installed as well now.
Yeah.
Folded you.
Yeah. 3 weeks early.
No idea much about their backline.
I literally don't know, but I saw a push. That's quite nice. Yeah, that's actually quite
One year back to 0.
I'm going to ask Ryan what makes him a credible source. Why are you credible source?
Have you ever been
What?
Have you ever been there, Brian?
I have been
How
to
many
the
kilograms of energy have you generated through geothermal energy?
I definitely should be assessed.
After this, I'm
Wow.
Still
Actually great. Dramatic.
Oh, you're joking. How many muscle-ups can you do, Ryan?
What?
How many muscle-ups?
Muscle ups? What is that?
Where you go all the way up.
Yourself up over the bar.
I don't know, I have to try that sometime.
So still 5
How many
We are not taking stop.
Just prepare yourself, brother.
Alrighty.
Okay, we're running, so you can start.
Hello, this is our Capstone Project on geothermal energy policy in the Philippines. My name is
I'm Matthew Winter.
I'm Annie Weissmeyer. I'm Sophia Lemon.
I'm Anna Pennard.
And I'm Ryan Zaff.
So we of course started out with the golden circle. We wanted to determine our why, our how, and our what. So our why is to increase the use of geothermal energy through policy. We wanted to find opportunities to curb emissions and how it can offset costs. And we wanted to focus on the Philippines for having the 3rd highest geothermal energy generation capacity.
So our how is applying policy that has been successful in other geothermally active countries such as Iceland while respecting indigenous land and communities.
And for what, we've created a policy framework which would involve the Philippines upscaling their geothermal energy production so that, just as Iceland is heavily reliant on geothermal and other renewable sources, the Philippines, as that country continues to industrialize, would not have to rely so much on fossil fuels, but instead they'd start out with renewable sources and continue from where they already are. So here's a map of Iceland with their geothermal plants in the gray and green dots here. Here's the one that we visited. And then here's a map of the Philippines and the geothermal plants, which are either currently operating or under construction. So we decided to sort of take what we've gotten from our trip here and compare the two countries. Now, Iceland, of course, different geothermal source where we get the mantle plume and the mid-ocean ridge. Philippines has a convergent boundary, but they both allow for geothermal plants. So Iceland has a current installed capacity of 755 megawatts electric from its geothermal plants. That's the need used by the World Geothermal Conference, and that provides 30% of the island's electricity. Iceland is smaller with 387,000 people back in 2023. They, of course, recently broke 400,000. But across the island, there are 30 high-temperature geothermal areas, which is defined as a well they drilled where there's greater than 200 degrees Celsius found down in the water there. And there are 250 low-temperature geothermal areas, which is less than 150 degrees Celsius. And they have 8 operating geothermal plants. It's expected by the World Geothermal Conference that they would expand the Reykjanes plant by 30 more megawatts electric, as well as expanding the Reykjanes plant. But that's all the current development that is planned because Iceland's already very well developed for geothermal. The Geothermal Conference also studied the Philippines. They have a current installed capacity of 1,918 megawatts electric. But since the Philippines, back in 2020, had a population of over 100 million, that's only 7.3% of the energy the islands need. But there are 136 geothermal areas spread around the islands. They also have 8 operating geothermal plants. And when the World Geothermal Conference was going over this, they figured that if all those areas were to be tapped for geothermal, they could generate as much as 4,000 megawatts electric. But due to some constraints on the restricting factors, which we'll talk about, a more reasonable estimate is around 2,152 megawatts electric. So these geothermal areas are sorted into geothermal fields, which can be proven, probable, or possible for commercially recoverable heat from underground. The proven ones, those are based on geoscientific surveys, so they've actually studied the subsurface, found, yes, this is there, and if we chose, we could tap into it. Probable ones, those are based on data from proxy wells that have already been drilled nearby. And then the possible ones, those are based on non-invasive surface observations, basic geophysical methods, but they think there's a chance they could find them. And then here's a breakdown of the different geothermal fields in different areas in the Philippines. You see lots of probable ones for high temperature, intermediate temperature, that sort of thing. So there's definitely geothermal areas that are viable.
Okay, so we adjusted our business model to fit into the format of our geothermal policy. So I'll be outlining the current policies in the next slide. So there's the Philippine Energy Plan from 2020 to 2040, and this is a plan to transition to a more sustainable and resilient energy system. It allows for foreign ownership on large-scale geothermal plants, and it has the goal of having 35% renewable energy by 2040 and 12% GHG emissions. And then the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act protects indigenous communities and ancestral lands, also integrates indigenous legal systems into the government processes recognizing land ownership. The Expanded National Integrated Protected Area System protects biologically significant areas with indigenous systems and practices. It allows for the exploration of energy resources in protected areas only for the purpose of obtaining information and data and with the least damage to their surroundings as possible. And this is to prevent situations that happened like in 1992 when the Philippine government declared that part of the national park near Mount Apo was a geothermal reservation, even though it was on the ancestral lands of the Manobo tribe. And there was a lot of opposition to the building of this geothermal power plant, and although the tribes did benefit from energy and the government reparations, it was encroachment on tribal lands, and we would not build another geothermal plant on ancestral lands. And then the Energy Virtual One-Stop Shop, it's an online platform that streamlines the process of government transactions. It centralizes all the document processing, and it increases efficiency, transparency, and accessibility of the process.
Okay, so rather than using cap-and-trade systems that can pose short-term solutions for long-term effects, with no guarantee that they will switch to geothermal, our recommendation for policy includes community engagement, sustainability, and expanding research through government funding. So community engagement would include expectations of energy corporations to show respect for the benefit of communities, including indigenous peoples and populations in the area by way of transparency and being active in the community. Sustainability should also be laid out as a principle of energy innovation to ensure its inclusion in practices and projects. Lastly, we would want to emphasize research as the first drilling is the biggest risk. Trying in government-funded research enables us to enhance the quality of our investigations, mitigating risk, and increasing our chances of success. This would include mapping out areas to entice stakeholders to invest in geothermal, to provide less risk and more support for projects, as well as add geothermal pipes seen here in Iceland to infrastructure bills as a more efficient way of ensuring projects' use. Overall, we would like to implement government investments at a base level rather than providing subsidies that can pose short-term solutions instead of long-term ones.
So policy has the potential to drive development of renewable energy resources through technology development, risk reduction, and price equalization. So some of our goals of the policy include multi-year upfront cost deferment that will mitigate the risk and offer support until the power production commences. We also want to match resource availability, incentives appropriately scaled to meet the needs of facilities, and this will be ranging from 250 kilowatts to multi-megawatts. Acknowledgement of the environmental and load advantages of renewable energy, and also provide strong community engagement prior to and during thermal energy projects to ensure with the local community stakeholders to ensure that the development project is on the right track.
The two main stakeholders we found through our research were the residents living in the barangays with the geothermal facilities, and a barangay is just a Filipino word for territory or state, and the other one is the industries that the policy will be targeting. And with the residents, we want to focus on strengthening the trust with their belief in geothermal energy, which we'll get to more on later. And with the industries, we related the relationship between the hydro plants here and the aluminum smelting facilities here in Iceland.
So the cost structure can be split into two parts: the surface exploration or the steam gathering system, and then the subsurface investments, which is the initial drilling of the wells. So the surface exploration is a small fraction of the investment in large power plants, and the cost from potential error is comparable to infrastructure error costs, so much risk for that. And then the subsurface investments, the drilling costs are 20 to 50% of the total investment, and there's high potential error from difficulty of predicting the drilling results. So it'd be high upfront costs, but a lot of long-term cost benefits.
So the Philippines has a very high public support for the expansion of renewable energy, with 86.2% responding to agree or somewhat agree, and then only 10% disagreeing. With such high public support, it's going to be easier to implement new policies without receiving backlash. What Iceland does well with public support is that they've earned their trust. We want to implement Iceland's methods to strengthen the trust among stakeholders. Methods like stakeholder dialogues and focus group discussions increase technology literacy and develop trust better than using mass media.
So for our next steps, which is basically our surplus, is going to be, as we've seen here in Iceland, students have been measuring the Silhamauer Glacier to see how much it has shrunk each year. This evidence of sustainable education can be brought worldwide. So we want more public awareness for future generations to be able to be empowered to take action and be active in their immediate community. So with application of this in the Philippines as a result of our policy implementation, there's opportunity for positive public focus on renewable energies and climate change.
Iceland utilizes tourism as a cooperation with governmental agencies and policymakers. We can see that through their political commitments. So the Icelandic government is supportive of tourism through the tourist site fund, and then the Icelandic Tourist Board works in close cooperation with governmental agencies, municipalities, and tours.
Sustainable development goals we chose were affordable and clean energy, sustainable cities and communities, and then partnerships for the goals. For affordable and clean energy, we really wanted to compare it to coal because that's the main energy source in the Philippines. So geothermal plants release a fraction of the carbon dioxide produced by fossil fuel plants, and then they also create very little nitrous oxides and sulfur gases. Geothermal energy is generated right near the plant, so that saves on transportation and processing costs. Geothermal plants are considered to be more reliable than coal because they can run consistently 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And then the International Investment Bank Credit Suisse reports that geothermal energy is now cheaper per kilowatt hour than coal drive power. For geothermal, it's 3.6 cents per hour or per kilowatt hour and 5.5 cents for coal.
The next sustainable, or SDG we're doing, is sustainable cities and communities. And the main city we wanted to focus on was Manila right here, and located between the 2 and 11 geothermal power plants. And as you can also see from the altitude map, it's at a lower elevation than both those plants. And this would take advantage of the same thing that the geothermal power plant we visited, where because it is at a higher elevation, it's more efficient to transport the hot water. So this would allow for Manila to be a great place for a more sustainable city.
So the last SDG is partnerships for the goals. So it's important to increase transparency and share research and technology with other geothermal countries. Since the biggest risk of geothermal energy is the first drilling, if you have more research, it would reduce the risk of the drilling. And there are some international partnerships, like the International Partnership on Geothermal Technology. This includes the US, Australia, Iceland, and Switzerland. And the requirements for this are to have active government and private sector involvement in advanced geothermal technology, as long as sharing the information.
A lot of their power goes towards sort of multinational companies, industrial. Do we know in the Philippines how they use their power? Is it for the people or is it for industry?
I think it's a little bit more spread out because there's so much more people and so much more going on in the Philippines than there is in Iceland. It's not just like a kind of clear divide between industry and population. So our goal is to kind of focus on the policy in general is a goal to focus on both industry and the population because we weren't able to draw like a clear divide like it is with Iceland.
There was also a partnership between 2 New Zealand companies that are using geothermal power in the Philippines.
Great. Okay, thank you guys for the questions. I have from Jake. So first of all, thank you for the presentation. I really enjoyed learning more about geothermal energy in Philippines. Unfortunately, I missed the beginning of the presentation. Could you please explain what led you to choose the Philippines for your project? Additionally, what did you find most interesting in your research?
So we chose the Philippines because it has the 3rd highest geothermal power generation capacity in the earth.
And yeah, we also chose it because it was just a good balance between they have the capacity to do it, they have the public support to do it, and also, I guess, yeah, those 2 main reasons.
We also figured it'd be most advantageous to focus on a developing country, so when it has not like fully industrialized and gone through like the cycle of coal, natural gas, petroleum, that kind of thing before reaching renewable energy, because a developing country, those countries are supposed to be like they're projected to be the largest greenhouse gas emitters in upcoming years. So if you're countries like the Philippines, if geothermal is implemented there to like the extent or proportion that's been in Iceland, that could also do more to offset greenhouse gas emissions than implementing it in an already developed country.
Great. Thank you so much. Should we give them one more clap?
Huh?
You want to flip through the sources real quick? They're in there at the back.
Yeah, we do have sources.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Work hard on that.
All right, let's keep it going. I'm gonna invite the next group up to the stage, which is the Rooftop Roots. Let's go.
stand over here so the mic picks them up better?
Before they get started.
It doesn't
It
matter.
doesn't matter, yeah. All right, can we get silence again? All right, thank you guys.
I'm Carrie Salino.
I'm Sam Monsiordini.
I'm Tate McKay.
I'm Preston Gill.
I'm Max Lawrence, and our project is Rooftop Roots, which provides urban communities with sustainable agriculture. And for a quick outline, we're going to go through the Golden Circle, business model, sustainability complex, sustainable development goals, ethical and environmental considerations, and some potential limitations.
So our group first met together to just get a general idea of how we can make agriculture in the United States more sustainable, and then that led us to our general why of our project. So our goal was to provide urban communities with access to healthy and inexpensive produce while curbing emissions with sustainable practices. And to do this, we thought of creating a multi-level apartment-sized greenhouse with renewable energy inclusions to power it. And generally, this would create essentially a self-sustaining unit for produce production in urbanized areas. So to come up with this general idea, we took inspiration from a few different places around the globe. So first, we looked at London. So there was a subterranean multi-level agriculture in London, which essentially was like a multi-level basement-style agricultural farm there. So this is a picture of that farm in London. And we also looked at Singapore's super trees. So these trees either do hydropower in some sort, or they do solar power. So there's solar panels in some of the trees, and that goes straight to the grid. And as well as there's pipes in some of the trees that collect rainwater, and that goes to municipal and residential uses. And also we took inspiration from when we went to the tomato farm here in Iceland, in that they had organic and very sustainable practices for agriculture, and also promoted very clean ways of producing it, such as their clean water going into it. And by combining all of these efforts, we wanted to create a system that would be applicable in the US and urban areas, as it costs about 12.8% more to eat healthy in the US than it does unhealthy. And even though this percent is not super big, if you're living on the poverty line, it makes all the difference in your life. So this was our general plan for our unit, and generally we'd hope to have more levels, but this is just a basic layout of it. So there'd be a different crop on each level, or crops that would work well together, so such as legumes being incorporated for nitrogen fixation. There'd be solar panels lining the top of the structure, collecting energy, and then also we'd have a gutter system that would lead down into a collection site, so such as like a pipe that would spin a turbine, so we'd also have that hydropower aspect to it, and then the water that is collected at the bottom would be used for irrigation. We would like to use drip irrigation to reduce the amount of water lost as we are trying to grow our plants. And then the energy in the structure would be used for things such as temperature maintenance to make sure that plants are growing the best that they can, and also through growth lamps, as the weather outside might not be the most conducive for growing the plants at the time. And to reduce how much energy would be used, we would like to have high light plants at the top, so they would be receiving the most light, and low lights at the bottom. And of course, based on location, the roofing structure might change. So if an area that's drier, it might serve to have more energy generated through solar panels compared to an energy that's wetter. It might be served to have more gutters for this hydropower aspect.
In terms of the resources needed for our project, we kind of divvied it up into 3 different categories. First being what is needed for the greenhouse interior. So starting with the planter boxes, we would need something like wood or bricks as to formulate the structure for the outside, soil, and in the future use compost from our decaying plant matter. Then we would also need seeds or germinated plants. Other features on the inside consist of LED lighting, preferably heated LED lights, so the plants on the bottom will get more light because they will not be receiving as much sunlight than the plants on the top. And then a drip irrigation system and gardening tools such as shovels, tills, gloves, etc. In terms of the actual greenhouse itself, we would need a plot of unused or undeveloped urban land, shatterproof glass, some metal framework for the building, solar panels, a turbine with a generator, and a catchment system for the rainwater. And then here's our non-material needs, which are human capital, human labor, and community support.
Okay, so there are several main areas of expenditure involved with this project. The first of which is land and property. So this will depend highly on the specific location, but for a 700 square meter building, this will cost at the least $700,000 and potentially much more. Second would be solar. So we'll need to pay for the installation and purchasing of the solar panels, which will cost up to $200,000. Third would be outfitting the facility with the greenhouse equipment as well as the vertical farm setup. This will cost as well also up to $700,000. And over time, as we expand and scale up, our primary additional costs will be equipment maintenance and staff.
So for the management of the greenhouse, the main activities will be crop cultivation, planting, and harvesting. And then there'll also be the marketing and sales side, which the sales will be working with different restaurants around to be able to sell produce, as well as getting community support and advertisement. And then we have distribution of produce, which would just be taking it to, delivering it to local restaurants as well as farmers markets. And then the supply chain management, which would be managing all the goods that come in, such as seeds, soil, and equipment needed.
Okay, so the U.S. Department of Agriculture offers a grant called the Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production Grant, which is meant to support and promote community agriculture based on healthy, locally sourced foods. Also, we will rely in part on wealthy donors who are highly motivated to invest in local issues. Additionally, we'll conduct fundraising and partner with local nonprofit organizations who share our goals.
Okay, so from the surplus, I want to first reinvest it back into crop research so that we could get a greater yield per square meter of greenhouse that we have. And then the next priority would be expansion of facilities to offer food sovereignty to more communities in the area. And then lastly, we want to diversify into different crop types so that the public could have more freedom of choice what to eat. And then for our revenues, since we are doing a using like a pay as what you want system, we would rely on donations from consumers, and we expect for 70%, and then sales to restaurants about 29%, and then selling excess energy to the grid is a small 1%.
Looking at beneficiaries, for citizens located in or near the building, consuming local produce stimulates the economy by increasing job opportunities and reduces food insecurity. And local food is also healthier because there's less vitamins lost during storage and transportation. And for that same reason, food safety risks are also decreased because the products are going through less processing facilities. And these same positive effects can be applied to businesses and neighboring groups within the city, fostering a greater sense of community and increasing economic independence. The environment is benefiting as well because this food system minimizes emissions typically associated with food production. Food transportation emissions account for about 19% of the total emissions produced by food production. So our use of renewable energy limits the greenhouse gases that are being put into the air, and our organic farming techniques eliminate the need for chemical fertilizers and pesticides, which have harmful effects on the environment.
So as you've probably gathered by now, this project will take the form of a greenhouse facility, a produce, and it will offer local affordable food access of any income level.
So in terms of our value proposition, we again divided into 3 different categories. The first one being community building. So one of the main objectives of this project is to foster a sense of togetherness among individuals in the community, and by providing a place where locals can meet, chat, and work together, they will be able to develop strong bonds with one another, increasing their sense of security in their own neighborhoods. The second one being sustainable agriculture. Currently, agriculture in America and other parts of the globe is one of the greatest contributors to climate change. The widespread use of monoculture farming has led to increased need for mechanization and other inputs such as harmful fertilizers and pesticides, which contribute to climate change. Our plan utilizes polycropping and low input ag, which has less of an impact on the environment. We also plan on using less wasteful irrigation techniques and implementing green energy sources to run our operation. And the final one here is food sovereignty, which is probably the most important aspect of this project, because it is helping lower income and marginalized communities gain a sense of food security. Low-income areas have difficulty finding and affording nutritious foods, so by having a garden that is local and easily accessible, citizens will be granted access to fresh and healthy options.
So the issuing of surveys to customers as well as public outreach will allow us a method of receiving feedback from the community we're serving. Additionally, the number of consumers, as well as product produced versus product taken by the consumers, will be tallied. Also, related metrics provided by censuses will include local poverty levels and food insecurity levels will allow us to measure the impact.
For our customers, ideally all our produce would be going to local citizens and businesses, but we would like to see support from local, state, and federal governments, and that could be both political and financial. And donations from philanthropic individuals and organizations would be a great way to get support from a wider demographic.
So our customers will have secure, easy access to fresh, healthy, locally sourced foods. Additionally, the community will benefit from greater connection and a lack of barriers for low-income customers.
So we will spread the news of our organization to be a means of community outreach, whether that be through either hosting or joining local events, giving out flyers or business cards, knocking door to door and spreading our word, or conversing with local people and businesses. And initially, since our project is community-based, our primary target is that of the community or neighborhood level. If successful in this stage, it is possible that it could be implemented at a larger scale, such as the city or regional level, but that would require additional funding and widespread desire for such expansion.
So for the SDGs, the first one is number 2, Zero Hunger, and our project goes right over this because we're offering affordable food in communities. And then the second one is Reduce Inequalities, and Rooftop Roots would provide areas with equitable food access to underrepresented neighborhoods. And then 11, sustainable cities and communities. So that's cities that are self-reliant and self-sustaining. And our project covers these guidelines because it promotes community collaboration and in a sustainable manner while creating more self-reliant neighborhoods.
For some important considerations, the building and construction sector accounts for 37% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So using eco-friendly materials like Ferroc in our project, which is like a carbon neutral concrete alternative, we'd be solving some of the problems that are faced by like more commonly used construction processes. And then for our plant selection, we'd try to use as many native plant species as possible, because a big thing is like localizing food production and consumption, because it's a lot more sustainable long term. And then allocation of energy, we'd like to maximize the efficiency at which we use our renewable energy, because the more efficient our renewable energy use is, the less we'll have to rely on traditional non-renewable sources. And then for ethical considerations, a community-centered project means properly valuing and considering their input and feedback to ensure the sustainability of the unit and the community it supports, and making sure the community and workers are properly equipped to manage the unit and its processes making these educational resources more readily available is super important. And then we also would like to see educational resources more available to like younger groups, which would help increase like the long-term viability of the project.
And while we see this being as plausible, at least in the future, there are some limitations or things that we need to set up first to make this plan. So the multi-level agriculture that we saw in London primarily produces only herbs and microgreens, which do not have very deep roots and do not require much soil. And the agriculture that we are planning to do is much more expansive, so higher yield and just generally larger crops. So we'd have to figure out how to integrate that kind of soil and that kind of maintenance on a multi-level plan. Similarly, the energy generation through solar and turbine might be enough. So while hydropower tends to be quite efficient at like 90% and solar only at like 12%, it might not be efficient depending on the region that it's in and depending on how many turbines or how powerful it is in that specific region. So either we need to outsource or we need to find a way to increase the efficiency of this area. Water collection will also require some maintenance. So unlike Iceland, there's a lot of air pollution in our cities. Our water tends to not be very clean, so there might need to be some kind of filtration system and just generally cleaning the pipes that the water is flowing through from the roofs. And also we might have some limitations of plant types given the rooting system, as well as we want very high yield plants without using GMOs, so the way that we structure it, such as they do with the tomato farm of finding the most efficient way to actually grow each plant for the highest yield, might need to practice some studies before we can actually implement this first.
Alright, so in conclusion, while rooftop roots is possible, the practicality may vary based on the location heavily, and the technology currently is lacking for high food production in such confined areas.
So references?
Amazing, thank you so much. We have time for one quick question from the audience. Is there any? All good?
Did you consider bees or pollination or anything for the crops, or did they not look like it?
Probably have to be something similar to what we were looking at in the shop, where they kind of had to import them. Always local pollinators might be the best, so we might have to see what local bees that we do have in the US, because there's a lot that will pollinate our local plants, but bumblebees won't pollinate, so that might have to be on even a level scale we have to look at.
Lovely. I have two questions from online. So one from Melissa Lee, the owner of the Green Program. So she says, hi Greenies, congratulations on your Capstone Project. What inspired this idea for your group, and how did you or your experience in Iceland play a role in your approach?
So we kind of wanted to start out with a sustainable agriculture approach, and then we really started thinking about how expansive agriculture and how much room it takes up, but also like transportation being an issue for a lot of cities, and the poverty level in the cities and the lack of access to healthy foods. So that kind of started us on like this compact idea that could be placed anywhere. And we got a lot of inspiration from the renewable resources like available in Iceland and how that kind of powers everything. So this idea of self-reliance and self-maintenance, we also wanted to incorporate into that building, as you guys kind of have in your own country.
Really good. And then the question from Jake, he says, thank you for your presentation, it was really insightful and well delivered. My question is, in which city, region or markets do you see the highest potential for growth for this greenhouse business?
So definitely I think the amount of solar power available, so a country in a super rainy city would help with water collection, but also would limit our solar power. So the whole point is to have a self-sustaining greenhouse, source of agriculture that won't rely on importing foods, obviously, but also importing energy as much as we can.
Yeah, when we were looking at the U.S., we were like debating maybe something like New York or Colorado would be possible, given like either scale of that they kind of all have all 4 seasons and tend to be more accepting of like more progressive policies.
Really good. Okay, thank you guys. All right, amazing guys. It's still going well, right? We're all alive? Woo! Okay, we're ready for the third group, the limestone lovers, so you can all come up to the stage. Thank you so much.
Picture.
I'm so excited. Let's go limestone.
Yeah. You can't really tell that.
Her picture's so funny.
She told us we had to.
All right, guys, you can start.
Hello, everyone. We are the Limestone Lovers. And today we're going to be talking about a creative solution to anthropogenic climate change using carbon sequestration or carbon capture. So first of all, I'm August. I'm a geology major.
I'm Emerson. I'm an environmental science major.
I'm Josh, energy engineer.
I'm Karina. I'm a geoscience major.
I'm Rhea. I'm environmental engineering.
So first of all, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to cover today. So we've heard of climate change, but just in case, we need a refresher. Humans need energy, and in the process of generating it, we tend to release a lot of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide. Unfortunately, when we put these gases into the atmosphere and modify the natural processes at work, it does tend to have some unwanted consequences. So we want to use natural solutions to combat this, and we want to use specifically ocean and geological chemistry to do that. This also has a benefit of supporting ecosystem services like fishing in California. Actually, being here in Iceland, we've seen the ON energy plant, and they've had a really successful program using using the company CarbFix to capture this carbon that they're emitting and sequestering it in the earth, which means they keep it and it's stored for the long term. So that's obviously been really amazing to see here, and we want to be able to implement that worldwide, including in America. And luckily, there are some scientists that back our claims here. Actually, there's been studies from MIT where scientists said, quote, "The basic idea of chemical weathering, the same process that CarbFix uses to sequester carbon, is sound. The only challenge is to make it practical." So in our presentation, we're going to cover exactly how we plan on doing that.
To cover the golden circle part of our project, the goal is to protect our planet by combating climate change and preserving the ocean ecosystems. But that is easier said than done. We aim to take advantage of the naturally occurring process known as the carbon cycle, using its benefits to rebalance Earth's ocean and atmosphere. In doing so, we will utilize a carbon capture system that creates a calcium carbonate solution. To store the contained carbon, it will be safely deposited into the ocean.
So August kind of went over this. We chose California as our primary spot to run up the scenario, and especially the Geysers power plant, as it is the largest geothermal power plant in the world. It has 13 operating geothermal plants spanning over 114 square kilometers with an annual production of 725 megawatts. This is actually 9% of the green power in California, which is actually relatively large, seeing as their solar is such a large part of it. But this is also 50% of their geothermal in California. These 13 plants alone produce 200 tons of CO2 per year.
So now I'm going to walk you through exactly how we plan on making this work. So the first step is just like we saw with CarbFix. We need to actually capture the carbon at the source, so at the plant. Where then we're going to pipe in some seawater. We're going to combine them, which makes basically carbonated ocean water. And then we're going to mine this plagioclase-rich basalt, which has lots of calcium in it, which we're going to cover exactly why that's important soon. We're going to get it from the Grand Ronde Formation, which is relatively close. We're going to crush them. We're going to crush that basalt using this lovely thing here. This is called a vertical shaft impact crusher. We've affectionately coined the name Abuela for it. Whoops. So yeah, we make a dust with it, basically, kind of like a pestle. And then we're going to make a slurry of the crushed rock and the carbonated ocean water. So once we have that, we're going to put it back in the pipe and send it back out to the ocean. It's going to be chemically reacting while that happens, and then we're going to release the solution into the ocean. From there, some other chemistry will happen, and the sediments that we will be adding will slowly sink to the bottom of the ocean, where they'll turn into rock, which then we'll store it for the long term. We'll cover a little bit more about the exact chemistry in a little bit.
So if you didn't fall asleep over that whole process, this is kind of a very easy, digestible way of how it goes on. We get the CO2 from the geothermal plants through the scrubbers, and we also importing the seawater. And in a process of dissolution is where we will combine it. With the basalt mine, we want our calcium rich basalt. We'll grind that up and combine the two, and then release into the ocean.
So now it's time for the fun part. We're going to talk about chemistry. To entertain you, there's a blobfish. You can hardly see it, but there's another little guy down here. So yeah, as I was saying, we're going to start by discharging the calcium carbonate-rich water into the ocean. So here's the chemistry part. You have the basalt right there. This is the carbon dioxide that's injected into the water and the water. There's some other stuff, but for the sake of this presentation, it won't play too much of a role. So from there, it'll convert into calcium carbonate and kaolinite. So these are both the particles that are going to be mixed into this water. From there, those two things will start to settle, as I was saying, where they're going to lithify, means to turn into rock. The carbonate, actually, when it turns into rock, will react with the ocean itself, and it will release free calcium, which these fun little guys here, little crabs and oysters and stuff, can use to make their shells. So that will help promote a healthy biodiversity of the ocean. And then also, when this happens, the other part of it, the carbonate here, will actually turn into sodium bicarbonate, which is a base and will help to neutralize ocean acidification. So, 2 birds, 1 stone.
So, why basalt, you may be asking yourself. Well, basalt is a rock that is both calcium and magnesium rich. Rocks with these qualities have a large mineral trapping capacity to convert carbon dioxide into solid carbonate minerals. Limestone lovers. According to a study by MIT titled Enhanced Rock Weathering, olivine or basalt dust spread on beaches or in the ocean would break down in a matter of years, locking up the carbon as it dissolves. This might also help address ocean acidification by taking up some of the excess carbon, thus that is making the seas more acidic. Basalt is also readily available somewhat close to the geyser geothermal plant and has the requisite chemical structure. In another study titled Carbon Dioxide Mineral Sequestration in Naturally Porous Basalt from the American Chemical Society, it is stated that the Grand Ronde Basalt Formation in the Columbia River Basin, which stretches through both Washington and Oregon, contains the necessary basalt for our operation. In nature, basalt rocks react with carbon dioxide and marine water to form harmless bicarbonate ions. This process is called weathering. By using our methods, we can speed up the weathering process and remove more carbon dioxide from the geothermal plant emissions.
Okay, so I know this looks like a lot, just bear with me. Most of this is covered elsewhere, so you don't really have to read all of it. I'm just gonna hit the key points. So I wanted to touch on the key activities. The biggest part of what our involvement in this whole process is going to be is just the design of the process and then getting it actually implemented and set up and running. Specifically first with the geysers plant that we've been talking about, and then later on hoping that we would be able to expand to either other geothermal plants or potentially even some non-renewable sources of energy like coal. So tying in with that, we don't really play a role in the actual financing of this. I'll get to the whole financing aspect in a little bit, but we're just going to oversee the design and the implementation, and then we're going to also kind of work on maintaining a relationship between all of our key stakeholders and making sure everything is running smoothly there. But the overarching goal is to get this implemented first at the geysers power plant and then later on at other facilities. So, funding and finances. We need money. That's the way that business works. So in order to get this running, we have 3 different sources of funding. So the first one would be the power plants themselves. They already have to account for their carbon emissions in their financing and their budgets because both because of the cap and trade and the carbon tax market, which I'll cover quickly, but they're required by law to pay to offset their carbon emissions and to keep their emissions within a certain level. So cap and trade is used by the state of California, and it's basically a system where California sets a limit on how much carbon is allowed to be emitted in a given year, and then every year that limit is lowered. So companies have to stay within this limit or they're going to be fined, which is obviously not something we want from a business standpoint. And then the United States and much of the world also uses a carbon tax market, which is basically where the federal government will set a price for a ton of CO2, and then companies are responsible to pay to offset the amount of emissions that they're producing. Another source of funding that we would look into would be private investors. So there are a lot of companies that already use carbon capture and carbon sequestration as like a goal, and that they're funding themselves for that. So we would want to reach out to stakeholders and see if we could get anybody who would be interested in funding our project. And then finally, another source that we could use for funding would be federal through local government. So the federal government funds projects like this already. Millions of dollars are being funneled into this through Biden's infrastructure bills that he's been releasing, including the Carbon Reduction Program, which is a $6.4 billion project aimed at reducing our carbon emissions. And then the state of California individually funds their emissions cutting through the cap and trade program that I mentioned, which is basically where if you're not in, if you're violating cap and trade, then you're owing fines to the government, which can then be used to fund projects like this. Okay. And then obviously there are going to be some obstacles, so we're going to go through those really quick, and then some solutions that we have come up with to kind of get around that. So our biggest issue is going to be getting support from scientists and the government to actually be able to deposit our solution into the ocean. Research is being done on this right now, both in North Carolina, and then a lot of private stakeholders and like private startups are also looking into this. So we would want to make sure that there's enough research and enough information before we would actually take any action. And then another thing we would have to look into is getting our permits. The state of California uses the California State Water Resources Control Board to moderate what is being released into the ocean. So we would need approval from them before we could actually go through with any of the process we've talked about. And then we would also need to create an agreement with the basalt mine to have a steady basalt supply, and then we would have to work with the power plants themselves to obtain the CO2. So most plants already have infrastructure through the form of like scrubber systems to collect both CO2 and other pollutants that are being released. So we would just have to make sure that any plants that we were trying to work with have this scrubber system in place, or have a system that we could retrofit to specifically capture CO2. And then the last thing we would need to do is just develop the infrastructure to actually transport both the salt, the seawater, and then the carbonate mixture that we would be discharging into the water.
So these are our sustainable development goals. So first we have responsible consumption and production. With this one, by practicing carbon sequestration techniques, we are promoting responsible consumption and production. And we aim to create a model that our partner plants and future partner plants can use, so that we can kind of spread the word and continue for the plants to continue to implement sustainable practices. And then for our climate action, our goal is to lower CO2 emissions, of course, and when implementing this at various plants, we promote and inspire further climate action within the producers and the consumers. And also we want to innovate new climate actions we can take to address different areas of the climate change. And then for our last one, life below water, with slowing ocean acidification. With our carbon capture process, it will slow ocean acidification so that ecosystems in the ocean can restore. And so kind of getting a little bit back into the chemistry, with the calcium, it'll help, like he said, the calcifying organisms to build shells. And then the sodium bicarbonate will act as a buffer, so slowing that further and preventing further deterioration. Okay. So our impact scale, of course, on our global scale, it's going to be a little bit slower. It's a process that will take a longer time. And so when restoring oceanic ecosystems, various systems will recover. We talked a little bit about ocean ecosystems. Food chains will restore, and coral reef systems. I know everyone loves those. Ecosystem services can also be restored, like tourism, fisheries. And then city and regional levels, of course, it will look good, I think, for the local plants if they can kind of have bragging rights to be like, we do sustainable practices. And it can benefit themselves and their community, And then we also touched a little bit on the California fishing industry. So, yeah.
All right, so our end goal is to expand not just with geothermal plants, but also any CO2 emitters, especially like natural gas and coal plants. And also with our model in and of itself, continue research on it, examining and taking samples of the water and watching the ocean life to ensure everything is doing as it should. And if any potential solid buildup grows, we can continue to move pipes or our depositing locations to kind of balance it out across the coast.
Here's our sources and any questions.
All right, let's start with one question here in the audience.
And how long does the lithification process take?
So that's a great question. It's impossible to say without actually researching it, but based off what we know, the lithification itself will take about a year, which is really fast. Usually this happens on the order of magnitude of thousands to tens of thousands of years to lithify. So by crushing it up, that's the whole enhanced weathering part. It makes it super, super fast in geologic time. And the actual acidification benefits will be even before then. It'll be close to the time that the rock hits the water. It'll change the chemistry to where it will help neutralize the ocean water.
Great. Right.
So if you're planning to turn this into the long term and spreading it over the globe, what kind of volumes of rock would or basalt specifically, would need to be extracted in order to meet the demands for pretty much solution?
So in this plant alone, going off of the 725 megawatts with the 200 tons of CO2, that would require about 530 tons of basalt. This changes slightly based off the calcium content of the rock itself.
And you can also additionally use other minerals that contain the calcium. So anything that's plagioclase containing, which is also olivine and basalt.
Andesite, yes.
Yes.
There are multiple other rocks.
So it's not specifically just basalt.
So it can be seen other places, just depending on what they have a high amount of.
We picked basalt specifically for this because there happened to be, basalt is one of the best for carbon sequestration, and there happened to be a large supply of it close by to the plant. But if there were another plant that didn't really have basalt, theoretically andesite or olivine could be used to do the same thing.
Great. Carrie,
I was thinking about it, but I don't know.
no worries. I actually have one question from myself and then one from Jake. I was just wondering about this Ronde formation, the mine. Is it already, what is the rocks being used for currently? And is it going to be available for you to use?
That would be, I need to stop doing that. That would be part of our talks with local governments and policies and funding. The rock has been dug into, as there was another study on specific carbon sequestration qualities of that rock. One of the studies I cited was the one about naturally forced basalt. That was a study that was done on the basalt there, showing the qualities of how it would be able to properly sequester. But I think so far, if I remember correctly, minimal digging has been done there, and that Grand Ronde formation.
There we go.
That Grand Ronde formation is a smaller bit of the Columbia River Valley formation, which is all about wonderful basalt. So that area specifically has had minimal digging, but more around that area that I haven't looked into, admittedly. There could be basalt mines there.
Perfectly fine. Okay, the question from Jake is, how do you plan to engage with the local communities and stakeholders to ensure their support and participation?
I can talk about that. So essentially, our first goal would be to talk to the key stakeholders, being the power plants themselves, and then investors. And then once we have some sort of deal worked out, we would want to basically push what the benefits would be to the community as a way to kind of grow support. So we talked a lot about ocean acidification. California has a massive fishing industry, and a lot of people just either enjoy going to the beach or spending time around the ocean. So pushing the benefits that we would have on the natural marine ecosystem would be a great way to get the community to be supportive. And then additionally, we don't have to really do a whole lot of altering of landscapes.
we're not really installing any new facilities. The only infrastructure we would need would be some piping. So it's not like we're drastically altering anything that's already being done. We're just taking the CO2 that's being generated and depositing it somewhere else.
And these geothermal plants have hundreds of miles of pipes already installed. So.
Awesome, thank you guys so much. All right, are we still good? We need some fresh air now, yes? You guys are doing great, we're doing amazing. So yes, the next team, shh, we need silence still, sorry guys. The next team is the Kentucky Environmental Educational Program. I'm super excited. So you're gonna connect. Do you need to be hotspotted? Do you need internet?
I'm not sure.
Do you have it somewhere open where you can just open it? You can probably just open it without doing that.
Yeah, like multiple times.
Just open it this way. Damn, just open it.
Thanks so much.
You're doing great, guys. This is really good. Thank you. But let's bring everyone in.
Yeah, I think I do.
Can you just open your PowerPoint straight from your computer? If you have it saved in your computer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. This is good. Just need to drag it.
I'm trying to get to actual presentation mode.
That's okay. Just leave it. Just
Is that fine?
Yeah, this is perfect. Yeah, you're doing great. Okay, thank you guys. You can start whenever you're ready. Can we get silence in the crowd? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charles Good.
I'm Josh.
Brady Kemper.
And I'm James Miller.
And we're here to present our idea for Better Kentucky. But first, we have to start with a little bit of history. So Kentucky is located in the southeast region of the United States. We have hot, humid summers, mild winters, and a lot of rainfall. And our main energy source is coal. 70%-ish of our energy production comes from coal, and around 25% comes from natural gas, which leaves a very small percentage, 6%, as renewable energy. We are 5th in the nation in coal production and use, while we are 37th in the nation for renewable energy, and that's thanks to our 11 hydroelectric dams. During research, we found out that we are dead last for wind and solar, and 43rd in education.
Yeah.
So, our golden circle is a pyramid. So as for why, there's a lack, an extreme lack, of environmental education in Kentucky, and we have a strong need to cultivate an interest in the environmental sciences, especially with students and young people, and clean energy and sustainability. So as far as how, we are going to provide a service that will give teachers a way to have the resources they need to go ahead and present their curriculums and their classes in regards to environmental energy, clean energy, sustainability, so on and so forth, by presenting them with free materials that they can request and a bunch of resources, which are essentially just pre-made educational packets. So our sustainable development goals, obviously education, but also in cultivating this interest, we hope to tackle a little bit of climate action, get students more involved with the community, and have them have an interest in renewable energy.
So we developed a bunch of different educational packets for different grade levels and different age groups because we wanted to reach all those different age demographics. So we have an elementary packet which is to really, like, him when they're young, you know, get these kids to be interested and intrigued by their environment, and also help them get out there and actually do something that's fun. So some ideas would be like teach them about some recycling, some gardening, stuff like that, local wildlife, and have them like go outside, plant some trees and flowers, do some arts and crafts, and take walks in nature and stuff like that.
Really give them a chance to get to think about where their energy comes from, and where their waste goes, and things like that, how they can help their community in small ways.
Middle school, they're starting to get a little bit older, and they're starting to get a little bit smarter. We want to challenge them a little bit more, so we want to go more in depth, stuff like climate change, energy sources, sustainability, and we really want to do more, go outside more, take them on more trips. So take them help clean up garbage in certain areas like parks is a really good way to help impact the environment. Going on hikes and taking them stuff maybe certain recycling plants, or just places to really show them how recycling and cleaning up can directly affect and help the environment.
And hopefully build on the interest that we've already begun to cultivate.
Right. And in high school, we want to really help prep them to get them more interested in learning more about the sciences of environmental stuff. But we also want to help get their minds prepped to looking at it as a potential career. We don't really have a whole lot of interest or jobs really about environmental science in Kentucky, and doing this actually might help boost that and change things for the better. So stuff like, making models for renewable energy, or taking them to certain maybe some hydro plants, or just, do some debates or research projects would be a really good way to help that. But also doing advanced environmental issues as a topic could really help drive that interest. Now, since we're going to do a lot of field trips, we need a lot of areas to go to. But we have tons of national location, landmarks and sites we can actually go to. Each one of those stars is a different one. As you can see, no matter where you are in Kentucky, there is one of those near you. This is not even half of what is in Kentucky. We have plenty of locations like this, but they're mostly caves and natural formations.
Breaking down our website, we really want to make this a pretty easy, kind of accessible website that really is easy to use, user-friendly, and kind of goes over our main point and really gets what we're trying to do here. And it's also going to have our financial overview. So this was really a non-profit idea, so we're really going to show kind of where the money's going and what it's being used to, and maybe what we could maybe cut cost on and improve in certain areas with the financial aspect. We will also have lots of sections for reviews and feedback. With this being a new idea, we want to really make it get feedback and see what we can improve on, kind of see what's doing well and what's not doing well. And we also want to have teacher and student videos, so anybody that's completed the packet kind of get their opinions on it, see what they thought, really just be able to show so far who's done the program. And then just email and phone number, really want to make this as best as possible, get any sort of advice, and really just go from there.
Yeah, or if they have any questions while they're in the middle of it, we can be there to give them an answer, some guidance, try to help as much as we can through the process.
The website acts as our sort of way of communicating and receiving feedback. It'll also be how we receive donations, and will contain a lot of resources for students and teachers.
And moving on to some examples here. These are 4 examples that have already been happening in Kentucky that are that have shown to work. The Crayola education program actually has a packet system on environmental science. We didn't realize that till after we had our idea, but it's very similar, and it has shown that it's worked really well and had a lot of good reviews. But then it's kind of like how all these 4 have been successful so far, and kind of want to follow how they've been doing their projects. And next is our cost breakdown. So our advertising, we were mainly wanting to focus on getting this to teachers, the schools, school boards, kind of the students, since we're doing more education. So this is just kind of like getting our marketing out. And then our instructional designer, this will kind of vary per grade level, considering you need more something more advanced for the high school rather than elementary type. So kind of the cost will vary on how to design the packet and what all would have to go into it, paying somebody. for that. And then we have our website startup costs, just kind of maintenance on that. And then for our project materials and field trips. So we're really trying to get this to where schools and teachers, they don't have to pay for that themselves. So really try to utilize grants. If we're able to do that there, it's kind of hard, but we want to make it to where the schools can actually apply for these grants through this right here, our project.
A few things to remember about the cost breakdown are that, like for this cost, it's monthly. The website cost, a few things might be able to be for free. These numbers are going to be more of a maximum. Let's see. And another thing to remember is that there are a lot of people in Kentucky, maybe not at the political level, but as a teacher at the schools, if you talk to people, they're concerned and they want to do their part and they want to keep, they want to educate students. And that we expect to have a lot of volunteers. We don't expect to have to pay for all of these things. This is honestly the worst case scenario.
And then moving on to our funding here, these are our 4 main funders kind of in Kentucky. Everything kind of funnels down through them, but these are our top providers here. They're hoping for that. They do provide lots of grants now that really aren't taken advantage of at all. So there's plenty of money that has been approved that can really be going into this project here. Some of our funders are actually our partners, the Kentucky Department of Education, which that will be both for us, which they're our education. They're concerned about what we're actually learning, and we want to make sure that they're involved so they can really be taking care and take an initiative into what we're trying to preach here. And then really also just the teachers and the school boards and local things like that, and make sure everybody's all involved and we're getting everybody's opinion.
One of the big ones, Kentucky Association for Environmental Education, they do grants, they do resources, they have whole curriculums that they'll put out. They've got your subject matter experts. I mean, they're a huge partner with this.
For our sustainability complex, we're going to focus on the state, community, and individual level. The state level, we're looking for a more educated students that'll grow up and be voting, but they can also vote. They can also influence the laws by spreading awareness, talking to their parents, social media. There's a lot of ways they can help without being of age. And then if this does kind of work out, we can maintain our nature. Oh, I'm sorry. We can maintain our nature with cleaner air and water. And I mean, there's a lot of beautiful stuff in Kentucky that tourists would love if you were into nature.
It seems like our politicians weaponize ignorance, and one of the hopes is that we will be able to educate our people enough that we might be able to change things at a political level, at the level of laws, by having a smarter community.
That's a good point, because politicians, if you kind of incentivize them and you kind of agree with greener laws, they love pleasing the public. So
They'll have to follow.
Yeah. On the community level, we want our students to, there's a lot of people that really don't believe in climate change or global warming in Kentucky. So if they could just, maybe have the conversations with their family, maybe meet in the middle, try to go a little bit more green in that area. And then group projects, that creates a bond over nature, which is a really good thing in local communities. And on the individual level, you can definitely be proud of yourself knowing you helped save your home. Kentucky's all of our home. We would sense of pride in it. And then, like Josh said, there's plenty of careers in those areas. So if you're interested, it'd be a great place to go.
Yeah, and that's kind of, if we can sort of provide an avenue for people to gain knowledge, for people to know, these students to know where they could go, what kind of careers they could have. We're hoping to make some real change. So that's...
Our process, we're going to start with our design packets with the subject material experts, because we want the highest information, and an instructional designer, which kind of lay out the lesson plan of what what the teachers are actually going to be doing with the activities. And then after that, we're going to want to get it out there. So we're going to go to school conferences, the Board of Education, a lot of where teachers meet and get their ideas what they're going to want to be talking about. We definitely want to advertise there. Then the teachers or schools will reach out to us. We'll make it really available with our website. And then they can apply for packets. And then after that, after they apply, we'll get all the materials to them, all online packets. And then once completed, the teacher and students will complete surveys, because that's really important for the feedback. And we don't plan on doing any testing because we want to keep it fun, and we did some research, and testing isn't really the best way of making people care about it. So, and then after we get our reviews, we're going to evaluate and make it better, because that's really important. Some key takeaways is teachers already have a hard enough time, not the best pay, overworked. So we really want to make it as easy as we can for them. And then the students, school can be boring. Y'all know, I was a student. So you want to make it fun, lots of field trips, lots of activities. And then more exposure to environmental science is huge in Kentucky because, like I said, there's not much of it. So, yeah, that's about it.
So a big thing with this is we really think that there are a lot of people who want to do a lot of good, and they really just need the resources. They need to know where they can look, what grants they can apply for, and if they had these bite-sized packets, curriculum plans that they could just introduce into the classrooms, take some work off of them, a couple of weeks where they don't really have to think about what they're going to do next. You know, we think that they would jump at that. We think it would be very helpful.
There's our sites, and any questions?
Thank you guys. Let's start with Emerson.
This isn't really a question, but I just think it's really cool that you all emphasize so much on having fun, because I worked in the park service one time, and they were talking to little kids, you have to make it fun, because then they'll grow up to be the ones funding the national parks. So I think it's really nice that you all really emphasize on that.
Yeah, we had a lot of inspiration from when we visited the local soil conservation, because he really
it was so fun.
pounded on making it for the kids, and going out and simple as planting a tree. I think anyone can enjoy that, as we all did. So, anything else?
Yeah, right.
So, is this curriculum something that you'd be trying to incorporate into the public school system, or would you keep it as a third-party package that you could give to public and private schools?
I think we'd be hoping to have input from the Kentucky Board of Education and the environmental programs to know for sure, but it sort of acts as a standalone program. That we, when there's a gap, when Earth Day is coming up or something like that, they can sort of reach out and be like, this would be, something they've heard of, and decide to try to incorporate it. Does that answer your question?
So it wouldn't be a full year thing that'd be incorporated into the school?
No, we think maybe 1 or 2 weeks per packet. That's how.
And then maybe go at their own pace,
yeah.
Because not every classroom is the same, So we want to make it as easy as teacher as possible. So we're not gonna make sure there's specific time it has to be done.
I'd say really available to anybody who wants it. Our school, we had pathways, for example, but it was just the engineering, agriculture, and business pathway. We didn't have any pathway kind of like this. So this is just really trying to get that out there, and maybe it can be its own pathway or something like that one day, and be more focused.
Okay.
With your background education being from Kentucky, what was the biggest shock or biggest learning experience you felt you had here while in Iceland?
They care so much about the environment here. I mean, so much. If there was a flower growing in Kentucky that could save the world, they would step on it. It's so different there.
Yeah, we were researching, we found a quote we thought was so just ignorant and funny. It was one of our high-ranking politicians, they said, God put coal on the earth for man to use. So yeah, that kind of sums it up how it is right now.
Okay, thank you guys so much. I have one question from Jay.
Okay.
He says, thank you for the presentation. What do you believe are the key components to ensure that sustainable energy becomes a fundamental part of education across all age groups?
I think keeping it fun, right?
Really just getting the word out, spreading.
If we can present it as a challenge for students to grow into, as something that they can, when we got here, one of the problems we were having is that we were trying to figure out how to solve this problem ourselves, and we're not scientists. And we couldn't come up with the answer. We realized it's going to be a challenge because we rely so heavily on coal, because the infrastructure is so so coal-based. That it's really going to take some genius. It's going to take some students who really care about this, and we're hoping to present it as a challenge to them to maybe grow up one day and solve this problem.
Definitely. I hope this will all work out really nicely for you. Did you have a question there?
No.
All right. I mean, you have kind of answered most of my questions, but I really want to say I really like this. This is definitely needed. Obviously, it seems. My kind of main thing is to. Do you think it's going to be difficult for you guys to bring this idea? Because now there's already an existing, some kind of similar project. What are you going to do to make this kind of more successful than that one? Do you have any idea?
The thing is, I hadn't heard about these projects before now.
So that's already.
So I think that the biggest thing we could do is, be there. Be
Just
at the
kinda
conferences, talk to the teachers, talk to the schools.
Get the word out. Just get our foot in the door, really, and just try to take off from there.
I think the thing keeping them from taking advantage of it is just a lack of knowledge. Just not knowing that it
I feel
exists in
like
the
it
first
might not
place.
be engaging enough, and that's why it isn't taking off properly.
True.
Yeah.
The Crayola site, which you were saying is similar, was that for all age groups, or was that focused mostly on
It is for a slightly younger demographic, yeah. A lot of what they do, they provide a lot of materials like crayons and coloring books and things, but they also have a couple of, I think, a couple types of clean energy packets that they send out, which seems pretty similar, but it's for, I think, middle school from what I was looking at, so ours covers a lot more of a spectrum.
Yeah. Awesome.
The rest of the presentation, so we've just given a bit of an intro about who we are. We'll then look into our golden circle, saying what our proposal is, why we're wanting to look at it. Then we've got the system architecture and implementation, followed by Canvas framework, then sustainability complex and SDGs, and wrap it up with a conclusion.
Alright, so our golden circle, why, how, what? So the why, it's to promote sustainable manufacturing processes, to bolster energy security and product resilience in future environmental and geopolitical conditions. The reasoning for that is within our manufacturing facilities, not only are they at the moment quite inefficient in what they do, they demand a lot of energy because of that. We need to make sure we can maintain that energy source and also make sure that the facility itself is promoting zero waste so that all of that material that we use is being used for some purpose. The how. So we're going to do this through large language models and machine learning integration into our physical manufacturing tools, machines and facilities, as well as introducing sustainable design features to recirculate waste energy. So we're looking to promote through circular economy principles based upon the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's zero waste and pollution principle. And then what? So what we're doing, we've designed a proposal for a self-sustaining manufacturing facility utilising those large language models and physical energy and heat extraction processes inspired by a geothermal model to produce a zero waste energy system. So yes, we have been inspired by this Iceland trip.
Yeah, so throughout our time in Iceland, we've been learning about the geothermal model, and it is a positive energy loop where in which Iceland's natural resources are used and repurposed. An example of this model would be water is heated using geothermal energy from underground volcanic activity, and then from there the water is evaporated, creating steam. This steam is used to move turbines, and these turbines are connected to generators, thus creating power that can be used in industrial activity or for homes. How does this link to us? So although the UK doesn't have the abundance of natural resource that Iceland does have, our company can learn from the key principles in the geothermal model, more specifically the reuse of resources and materials within our company already.
Alright, so here is the system architecture. It's a bit of an abstracted view of what we want to do. So at base level, we're looking at the inputs, the process, the output, and how we recirculate that. Here on the left-hand side, you will see the use of sustainable energy. So the first thing is make sure that the power source we have is sustainable. You see a model there of geothermal as an example. Next, we go into the actual process itself. For us, that is the facility. Within that facility, we have a set amount of steps which you typically see manufacturing go through. Step 1, initial build and machining. Step 2 is the heat treatment of those specific components, subcomponents or systems. And then step 3, which for our company we do, is final build and assembly. All of that is supported, you can see in the bottom left-hand corner there, a data center. So that data center is where we're utilizing the power of AI and machine learning to support all of these steps. So our machines should be able to have the capability in place to make sure that they are as efficient as possible. That is continuous improvement, continuous monitoring of those specific processes. So an example would be when we manufacture something using 3D printing, the last thing we want is it suddenly collapse midway through because we didn't see that actually these lasers should have worked in a specific pattern halfway through its build, and now we've wasted 36 hours and all that energy, cost, resource, material has gone. Through AI, we have a constant monitoring state that allows that specific algorithm to understand what patterns are going to allow us to make sure it maintains structural integrity. So that's efficiency. You'll see here system 1 and 2. When we speak system 1 and 2, that is our use of the heat pump system. So that is us taking any excess energy, once we've made it as efficient as possible, to then extrapolate all of that into a reuse and recirculation of heat or water into either further manufacturing steps, or we can take it into external sites as well within our facility. So something as simplistic as office heating or boiling your kettle. As long as we can make that a zero waste process through an effective means, it's done its job. And then again, any further electricity we can use, we want to reintroduce that into the cycle and use it as a sustainable energy source. So how are we doing this? What is the technology we're integrating? We've gone into it a bit, which is the machine learning and AI. So we're integrating machine learning into manufacturing. That offers numerous benefits, mainly around the predictive maintenance management, as I've just gone into, our quality control as well, optimization of build time. So AI can also tell us how we can build it faster. It can produce a heat map for us to understand, actually, if we start doing this, we're going to be able to make sure that this is done in half the time. We're saving the costs for that and also making sure that material is used effectively. So yeah, the process by which you actually do this from our data centers is firstly data collection. The AI model will start with a foundational data set. It'll process that data. We will train the model through AI specialists, and then we're going to integrate that into the manufacturing system itself. And that is then a continuous improvement cycle. It's iterative. So we will keep going through this until it reaches that kind of cut-off curve, 98, 99% efficiency that we can achieve practically within a model. And then the second step, the physical integration side. So this is our heat pump energy exchange system architecture. So what do we need to actually produce physically to support all that excess energy that we have that would become waste if we didn't implement a model like this? So we'll have sources from machinery, our data centers, and our cooling and other heating systems, which will result in excess energy and water. We want to take that through this process. So we're going to have it go through an evaporator, which will then, we will compress that heat or water. It will then go through a condenser, and then through a heating element. That element allows us to actually create a reversible process. We will either cool down that particular metallic element or water, or we can heat it up, whatever purpose we need it to fit within our facility. That then go through an expansion valve, vice versa, whichever it needs to be. And then we've got our output. We're going to have a heated or refrigerated source, which will go into, as we said there, step X, so step 1, 2 and 3 from the previous slide. It can go in any machinery components there, or it can go into other facilities, office spaces and so on.
So here we have our implementation plan. As you can see, it is split up into 3 phases. The first being the creation of a facility model using a large language model. The second phase being the assessment of facilities relevant to the project, and this will use a heat map as previously mentioned. And then the third phase, this will use large language models to highlight problem areas and embodiment strategy and installation of necessary infrastructure such as heat pipes, distillers, pressure gauges. There will also be some risk assessment and also design solutions for the recirculation of these materials.
Okay, so the next few slides are looking at the Canvas framework that we've provided. So for key resources, we obviously need funding for further investigation and research, and then for actually implementing the pipe system itself. So we need the large language model building, possibly from an external company, using the shortest amount of code possible, as any excess redundant code would be using additional power processing and therefore extra carbon emissions. Also the waste heat from the site and the electricity and water. So as well as the piping itself and the materials for this. So possibly again using what we learnt at the geothermal power plant, how they built their piping with the rock wool for insulation to ensure efficiency. And the support from our key stakeholders, which I've listed various there, but mainly just manufacturing and facility stakeholders. And to ensure our proposition has a lasting impact and is successful, we will continually monitor the LLM and ensure that excess heat from the manufacturing processes is being taken up by the system and recycled into areas of need, as well as tracking the costings saved from removing the heat to the buildings, decreasing the energy usage, so we can compare against what we're currently doing now and the impact that we have. So overall, our customer, which is our company, will get a decrease in manufacturing and office buildings' carbon footprint, whilst also decreasing the energy usage and cost of heating the buildings.
Yep, so here we have the framework continued, so types of intervention, the removal of waste from manufacturing processes and the recycling of that waste into areas of need. This continues the circular nature. And then we have channels, so the customer is not external. And then we have our beneficiaries, so the company as a whole will benefit as the carbon footprint is reduced. This is better for the environment, of course, and it improves the reputation of the company, which is beneficial for when we come to bid for different contracts. And then facilities also benefit from lower upkeep costs as well. And then for the customer, as stated before, the customer is interest-specific. The scope for this project is across a wide range of engineering and manufacturing departments, and the most likely people to release funding for this project are the kind of overarching engineering and manufacturing directors.
Okay, so if you're still with us for funding, I've put a nice picture of a waterfall that you can look at while I talk through it. But there will be a few different costs for this, as we've got quite a few stuff going on. So this will include the cost for people actually working on the project further, so either for further research, or actually implementing our proposal. You've also got the cost of building and monitoring the large language model, and the cost for implementing the piping system and all the materials that would be involved in that. There will be some money that we are saving through implementing this though. Mainly the energy savings that we're making are through not having to heat the office buildings from external sources like National Grid. You can see the rough number there for a 100-person office, so that's like £10,000 to heat a building. Our office buildings on site are a lot bigger than that, so we'll be saving quite a lot more money and therefore a lot more carbon savings. And obviously the carbon savings that we're getting from this we don't plan to reinvest. Then finally, to generate this revenue and to build the system, we will ensure we are effectively communicating with our stakeholders and just keeping them involved through the entire process.
Yes, so the sustainability complex, there is 3 areas that we believe is kind of most likely, really. So the global combat environment is constantly changing, but so are geopolitical energy usage laws. Efforts to maintain alignment is crucial. Promotion of sustainable, efficient manufacturing is vital. National state, which would be the UK government, planned implementation of the sustainable manufacturing complex that reaches the nation's requirements of producing zero waste. The individual, so that would be the customer will remain vigilant of their industry's environmental impact. SDGs, as you all know, I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to go through them. Our priorities, climate and action, industry, innovation, affordable and clean energy. Climate action, our efforts will allow us to manufacture sustainably and efficiently by integrating AI and the geothermal model, producing goods without waste. This is due to the global net zero goals, which have been passed by 80% of governments. A global effort is required to transform the manufacturing industry. This is the only way that we can maintain net zero carbon goals. Affordable and clean energy. The facility will integrate AI and sustainable energy resources to produce any resource that is required. This allows us to maximise production whilst minimising the effect on the planet. Conclusion. So implementing a zero waste strategy in our smart manufacturing facility will revolutionise our operations, setting a benchmark for sustainability and efficiency in the industry. By integrating advanced technologies and innovative practices, our process will eliminate waste, enhance efficiency, promote sustainability, foster innovation and improve quality of life. And again, the 3 highlights kind of just linking back to our SDGs once again. So our first highlight, which is the climate, so sustainable and efficient manufacture. Highlight 2 is manufacturing innovation, so the integration of AI to kind of transform manufacturing processes into smart manufacturing. And finally would be the zero waste production, which is kind of clean and responsible energy usage.
Thank you guys so much. Are there any questions in the crowd? Yeah, Ryan.
Oh.
No, Josh,
Yeah.
sorry.
So you mentioned that for like the initial energy, you want to look for more sustainable avenues, but also mentioned that the UK doesn't actually have a lot of, capacity for that. How would you outreach to meet those goals?
Yeah, so I think actually the UK uses about 50% renewable resources. Also, this is a dream scenario. So in my dream scenario, we could have our own nuclear power plant, but that might not quite happen. So I think with the the way the national grid is set up in the UK, I think with the access that we have to renewable resources, we'll be just fine. Any more questions?
Any other questions? I mean, for me, like the technology is obviously way too advanced for my understanding, but it looked really cool. Did you do any research on like any other company or an industry that is utilizing AI in this way?
Yes, so Siemens are the pioneers in this at the moment. They have something called a smart facility. So that is how you start to bring in autonomous platforms. So that could be the likes of what Amazon does with their kind of pallet-based movers now, as well as how that then implements with AI. So how you make, again, efficiencies, how you create the most efficient routes and get the most out of the time that you have. So Siemens are the ones that are mainly pioneering that at the moment. Amazon as well from a cloud-based software platform use. So if we were to go cloud-based for this, which isn't likely, that's why we mentioned a data center, we'd need to have this internally stored. But that is also an option for more commercial use. But they're the main 2 that it's inspired by.
Really good. Seeing if Jake is going to send a message, but he's probably thinking, what should I ask? Any other? Christoph, do you have a question? Yeah, Carrie?
So these other organizations that you just mentioned, are they using it as far as sustainability or just as far as efficiency in their business?
Mainly around efficiency, because it's, as what Hannah's mentioned, it's about reducing redundancy in coding and creating the best output out of the minimal amount of energy use. And that's where we're trying to innovate more, where we took that example and realised actually there's still excess waste energy here. How can we repurpose that and recirculate it within our systems to get the most out of it?
Yeah.
I was wondering, you had like the 5 steps that started with data collection and then went around, and that it all involved AI. I was wondering whether your guys' company had a system now in place that like didn't have to use AI, or was there any like base level trying problem solving for this problem already, or are you guys totally tackling this fresh?
That's top secret, I can't tell you. No, actually, I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I'm not too sure.
So we are doing it from a lifecycle management perspective. So how we look at our management of products throughout the life cycle is really important as well. So again, it's making sure that we reduce redundancy. We'll have ways in which we have to design to British Engineering and International Standards Organisation standards, that's what they're also called. So they have specific requirements that we have to follow that might be 20, 30, 40 years old. And to be honest, they're not always the best way to go about it. There is a required level of redundancy, safety, control and quality in that, which is great, but not for when you're looking at innovation. There's this principle or kind of mindset where when you look at this sort of innovative solutions, we'd rather fail fast. So it's trying to realise what can we get out of this process, or just looking at this concept as an R&D stage that then actually does become a practical use that we'll then take through and make sure we can get certified and qualified for use in products.
So apparently the live stream is lagging a bit, but it's okay. But I have a question from Melissa. What do you think is going to be the biggest challenge in starting this? What would their first step be if they were to start tomorrow?
I can answer that. I think because we're a manufacturing company, a lot of the people that work for us are shop floor people. They've got very traditional ways of doing things. So I think changing the culture around why we need to do it sustainable rather than just the easiest way, I think that will probably be the biggest curve. But hopefully if we continuously engage with stakeholders and put that sort of education message across, that'll help things.
Love it. Okay, thank you guys.
Take you through all of our content slide, but essentially we're going to introduce you to ourselves, introduce you to our project, take you through a number of kind of tool sets and applications to kind of support our project, go through a little bit of a feasibility study as well, and then kind of go through sort of how we're going to hopefully implement this into our business. Our golden circle, let's start with why, obviously. Keeping it quite top level really, to really kind of improve air quality, increase biodiversity, you know, very, very top level impact to what we're trying to do, breaking that down a little bit further. We're wanting to kind of take a lot of what we've learnt here and seen whilst been here in Iceland and apply those into some really innovative and sustainable solutions and implement those into our business and also educate people on that as well. So how are we going to sort of look at doing that? What is the what? It's going to be looking at installation of some moss-themed solutions around some of our key impact areas on site, and also in conjunction with that, educating and bringing awareness of the benefits of those through kind of like visual applications as well, and also through going out and engaging with people also.
So the issue, as we see it, on our sites, but not exclusively to our sites, poor air quality, some from our operations, some just from people coming to work, the number of cars coming in and going off site, low biodiversity and concrete jungles. A lot of workplaces probably common with ours. There's a lot of grey, there's a lot of roads, there's a lot of buildings, there's not a lot of biodiversity, and in turn it has an effect on people's mental health. It's not great to look out the window and see grey. So our proposal is that we're going to implement moss everywhere. The benefits of moss, there's loads, we'll go into them, but as a brief overview, cleaner air, improved biodiversity, more green spaces, which leads to better mental health. We'd want to be improving employee awareness through the implementation of moss and reducing carbon footprint via carbon offset due to the photosynthesis of carbon dioxide out of the air. And ultimately, if we're thinking really big, reversing the effects of climate change. Our project is linked to 5 of the Global Sustainability Development Goals: good health and well-being, quality education, sustainable cities and communities, climate action, and life on land.
Okay, so again, what we're actually trying to implement as part of our project really does start with kind of communities and neighbourhoods. So we're really trying to start with kind of what we're doing as a business and how that's going to impact the kind of surrounding area, but also how people that either work with us or people come and visit us can take some of these and take some of this learning and some of these applications into their own household, and the individuals in turn will then have that level of accountability and responsibility to make some positive changes towards achieving sustainability.
Okay, so I'm moss. I think I started this experience saying I love moss, and I love it even more after spending days surrounded by it. And I think hopefully that some of my enthusiasm for moss has rubbed off on my colleagues. So moss is a part of the bryophytes family with liverworts and hornworts. There's 20,000 different types worldwide. 1,000 of them are in the UK, and 133 of them are really common. So we're taking a leaf out of Iceland's book and using our natural resources to do something good. So the advantages of moss are that they can alleviate flooding. So lots of our sites do actually suffer from flooding because it rains a lot. So like sphagnum moss can absorb up to 20 times its own weight in water. So carbon capture, the peat formed from decomposed moss results in carbon being locked away for millennia. It can convert carbon dioxide into oxygen like all plants through photosynthesis, but it's 4 times more effective than trees. It can actually eat pollution particles, which is amazing. And I'll read this bit, it metabolizes particles and converts them into natural and harmless biomass. And it supports biodiversity in our native species because lots of bugs and invertebrates live inside them, the woodlice and the slugs, and they feed our wonderful birds, and our wonderful, my favourite, long-tailed tit can make its nest out of moss and spider's web and feathers, which is really cute.
So for this project, although we wanted to put it everywhere, we had to choose just 4 different ways of implementing it. So we did a bit of a feasibility study on the different ways that are currently out there to implement moss. One of the first solutions was using it on external walls and roofs. A positive to this, moss has an insulating effect. It also has a bit of a cooling effect due to a process called evapotranspiration. which is actually quite useful because although the UK is quite a cold place anyway, we do have quite a lot of computers, and in the summers are getting increasingly hot, so that kind of cooling effect will actually reduce the amount of heating we have to use. High levels of CO2 and particulate matter absorption. We've actually got quite a lot of surface area on our buildings and on our roofs that we can put all this moss, so it will actually be quite a large amount of CO2 that does get converted into organic matter. You've got the added benefit of aesthetic appeal. As we've already said, we've currently got a bit of a concrete jungle going on. By adding moss into the exterior of buildings, we do hope to influence people's mental health, hopefully make them enjoy coming to work a little bit more. Now there are some cons to this approach. Moss, especially when it's wet, as we've already said, it can carry up to 20 times its own weight in water, so it can actually get really, really heavy. If you put moss on your ceilings, you'll definitely need to make some structural changes to the buildings, maybe adding some steels. Obviously that gets quite expensive quite quickly, unless you're doing a project from scratch, but then it's still more expensive. And if done incorrectly, it can cause structural damage. If you don't look after it properly and you are just letting it get overgrown, letting it get too heavy, it's going to cause structural damage to your buildings.
The second idea was for the moss lawn. So there's quite a lot of areas where there's just like manicured grass everywhere. So we'd like to replace that grass with moss. Obviously to soak up the rainfall, the pros. It maintains the moisture in the soil below and keeps the conditions around them humid, which also enables the ferns and other things to grow. There's less maintenance. Quite often we're in a meeting or on the phone and we can hear them mowing the lawns outside, which is quite intrusive. And they're also using petrol mowers and things. And they're also treating the lawns currently to kill the moss and to kill the weeds. So we want to try and retrain brains to let them see the beauty of it. And also it's quite visible to employees because they're walking back and forth to meetings, different buildings and going to the canteen and places. So it would be great for them to see it and hopefully implement it in their own homes. So the cons are, so the current view, UK households, they do spray it, they employ companies to kill it in their lawns because they love their manicured lawns. They're getting rid of their front gardens to park cars, and they're jet washing all the time, which drives me insane, to get rid of moss. And I want to say, what about birds? Which I do to my neighbour all the time. So yeah, so it's trying to retrain those brains, and but the cost is also a con because an instant replacement would be quite high. But if we just encouraged it and just let it take over the grass, that would be lower.
The third implementation we looked at was the city trees. So I don't know if you've seen any about, they're becoming increasingly popular within high density cities. Some of the pros, now the levels of CO2 and particulate matter that they're able to absorb is extremely high. We've seen some websites that claim that they have the effect of around 270 trees just in one unit. Now we'd have to do some scientific research to actually understand them figures further, but again they do seem like a good solution. You're able to position them in high pollution areas. Now for us we have entrance ways where cars are idling and then they accelerate away. You can even smell it when you go to them areas. You can tell the pollution is significantly higher. If you were to position these near that location, you could definitely reduce the amount of particulate matter going out into the atmosphere. Little impact on existing infrastructure. These are just standalone units. You can kind of just place them onto existing car parks and they would just work. And there's also high visibility. So again, going to back to that location I've already described, putting these at entrances and exits, you definitely get high visibility for people coming onto site, be that customers, employees, people doing training, anything. They'll definitely get visibility of it. Some of the cons, obviously these are quite expensive to install. We saw again one estimate that was around 17,000 per unit, but I think that sounds a little low. And the maintenance of them, you need to feed these nutrients in order to keep the moss alive. They aren't just self-sustaining, so you would have a little bit of expenditure there. Another con is it has little impact on biodiversity, as a lot of the moss is like trapped within the actual unit itself. Birds and other kind of animals aren't able to get into the inside layers, so you've only really got the external surfaces that actually have an impact on the biodiversity. Yeah, that was it.
The fourth implementation that we were looking at, we've seen in Iceland, internal moss walls and displays. So the pros of installing a moss wall and display into areas on site are that they're a really good visual aid, especially for education pieces. They'll clean the air from everybody breathing in the office. and there's a low infrastructure cost. They're also hypoallergenic, so you're not going to get people who've got like pollen allergies sneezing all over your office. The cons are that they're relatively low quantity of CO2 that they're processing because they're very small areas compared to the other things that we're suggesting. And also that incorrect maintenance might lead to them dying if they're not left in, if they're left in direct sunlight, if they're not misted enough. Depends on what sort of growing medium they're put into. They might attract like fungus gnats or other small irritating fruit flies that you don't really want flying around your office.
So based on them implementations, we did a bit of a comparison matrix to kind of evaluate which solution was most suitable for us. If you press enter again, I think we need to see the bottom of this as well.
Sorry.
So along the top you can see all the 4 different implementations, and along the left different factors that we think are important. Now different companies might have different weightings based on what they value, but for us we just left it generic. We left them as a valuable, each having the same. And for us, you can see our total at the bottom. We think the moss lawns would be the best implementation for us to choose, achieving a score of 20 out of 25. Yeah, I think that's summary.
So, I don't know about you, but whilst being in Iceland, I've really been taken on a journey kind of showcasing what the people of Iceland actually go to achieve. It's not just about doing what they do, it's about telling people what they do and kind of educating other people and showcasing this through exhibits, through some of the live implementations, through some of the demonstrations, some of which you can kind of see here. Our aim is to really take what we've learned here and take some of this kind of interactive journey that we've kind of all been on as we've gone through some of these hydro plants and geothermal plants, and take this kind of experience back to the UK. And really kind of try and replicate this within some of our sites, within some of our kind of high impact and high kind of footfall areas. We're trying to do this through both internal and external. So internal is kind of getting our customers, getting our employees, getting our visitors really kind of involved and kind of showing them what we do and how we do it, and showing little examples of that. And that really will then help to motivate the workforce and get them taking these ideas and this culture and this change of behaviour back home with them and kind of implementing it back in their personal lives as well, but also externally. So not just kind of doing what we're doing on site, so people have to come onto site to see what we do, going out there and kind of presenting material to schools, to communities, to kind of other educational groups, and really try and inspire the next generation of people to really focus on sustainability and how to implement some of these things in their future careers.
So this might look a bit busy, so we're not going to go through it box by box. I think a lot of it has been covered already, particularly the value proposition, but the ones that would probably zoom into is that this would be funded by our company. However, I think it's probably transferable to other companies as well. Any interested parties would be able to take the model and implement it themselves if they were to fund it. Any revenue would probably just be reinvested straight back into it. I think it works best as a bit of a reference document, but if there's any questions on it afterwards, we can go through that.
So in conclusion, moss is wonderful and we have it in abundance. We need to retrain brains on the wonders of moss, and we have lots of options for our company to consider. And what do you think? Have we convinced you of the wonders of moss?
Yeah.
Scan the QR code for Jane's favourite clip ever.
I would definitely recommend doing that if you are able to, because
I love it. Everybody take it on their phone. Are there any questions in the audience? Yeah, Carrie.
Well, like looking at your company and just like the space around it, were you able to find out had any heat island effects going on? Like if your area was a center of a lot more heat comparatively, because then like the moss lawns might have a purpose outside of that.
So we are on our main site is on the west coast, and it is really precipitous, I suppose. So I suppose the ground is wet most of the time, so it's sort of moss exists there already, and it's just a case of encouraging it, I think. But so have I answered the question really?
It's more just like down, like city-like areas that you were saying, like concrete
So they're
jungles will
not-
get very hot.
Yeah.
So I was like, are there areas that you could add moss on the ground currently that there's not, or are you talking only about replacing the current area of grass?
Yeah, so we can certainly, so lots of our sites, because of the nature of what we do and what in cities, they're outside of cities, they're, you know, alongside estuaries, along the coast and things, so they're concrete jungles within the site, but the sort of surrounding areas are quite rural.
We'd do a
so
feasibility study into different types as well to make sure that we were selecting native species and getting it in a place that is going to thrive without needing a lot of intervention.
You guys talked about like the moss carpets and like replacing grass and how if you just don't jet wash it, it can come in naturally. But if you were to have it on the ceilings and the walls, that has to be like implemented in or planted in or however it's done. So I was wondering if there was any cost associated with that that might steer away some people. How expensive is that?
Absolutely. So part of our matrix was how expensive. So you see here value. City trees are very expensive, we understand that. Apart from that, external walls and roofs is also very expensive. You're going to have to make the infrastructure changes initially, which is going to be a big expense, and then planting it again is another expense on top of that. We couldn't get actual statistics, we did try, but without contacting suppliers directly and knowing exactly what numbers we have, it's very difficult to get any real data to base it off. We just had to kind of go by some research and then make it a value, basically.
Makes sense.
Excellent. Let's do one more question from the crowd. Yeah? You had a question?
Mine was pretty simple. Is it possible to do a partial moss lawn, or does the grass like overtake again? Like how does that?
yeah, so my front lawn used to be completely grass, but now I would say it's about 50% moss, so I just haven't treated it, so it eventually just takes over the grass. It's definitely strong.
That's nice. All right, so we have one question from Jake. Thank you for the presentation. How does the initial cost of installing the moss walls compare to other air purification methods? Any others?
That is a great question. I honestly don't know how it compares to other air purification methods. We know that there are some values associated, so 1 square metre of moss is equivalent to 1 kilogram of CO2 captured, which I don't really think there's any other ways of doing that with machinery, really, without having to go to massive, large-scale carbon capture devices. So within the workplace, there isn't really that much alternatives. So yeah, I think it's one of the few solutions we have.
I love it. He has another question. What is the expected lifespan of a moss wall?
Depends how you treat it.
Yeah.
Most of them say 2 to 5 years, but I think if you were to treat it incorrectly, it could be 2 weeks. If you really look after it and let it spore properly, I'm sure you could make it last indefinitely with the right nutrients and treatments.
I think it's important to note as well that some of our solutions, for example, the kind of moss lawns, for example, might not necessarily be in kind of areas where people are going to see them as much. It might be kind of more where it's most efficient, which might be elsewhere on site, a little bit out the way or whatever. However, some of our other ideas might be to kind of inspire and promote what we are doing on other parts of our site. We have bees on site as well. We can't see them because it's not beneficial to have them in visual areas. So I think there are other air purification methods and things like that, which might be slightly cheaper and slightly more effective. However, what we're trying to do here is to have an impact, a visual impact, and something which will promote people going away and having that bit of accountability and responsibility in what they're doing, because they're driving into site and seeing some of these things and it's processing in their minds of the benefits that it'll have.
I love it. That was such a good ending. Let's. All right. Wow, you guys. I'm really proud. This was amazing. All of your presentations were amazing, and I just want to thank you for being so accommodating and nice about all the technological difficulties that we had. But it's been amazing to spend the last week with you and see how you kind of went from, just meeting each other for the first time, formulating groups, and even formulating ideas of a project like from day one. That's kind of amazing, and I feel like I haven't been doing anything. It's been really nice, just hanging around, asking if you need my help, and you haven't had to need my help, which is kind of sad, but you know, it is what it is. But yeah, and I love seeing how many of your projects were taking ideas that you've learned from here in Iceland. That also made me really proud. And also seeing how much you're taking from the like the on power as well, which is nice. I at least gave you some ideas from my presentation, so that's good. But I kind of, just want to thank you all for participating in this. And you're done. Like, that's amazing. So we can just do it. So yeah, let's just say goodbye to the people online, and we're gonna have some fun now. Okay, bye. Wow, woo! Let's open windows. Okay, so guys, before you all start like running away, let's take our computers and start with, hey, don't give me that look. Let's start with one from each team sending Jake